What happens to a civilization when it leaves no empire but reshapes the world anyway? No grand armies, no pyramids, no marble monuments, and yet their fingerprints are everywhere. In every alphabet we write, in every contract we sign, in the names of gods we still whisper, reshaped by time and translation. They were the first to sail beyond the horizon, the first to turn language into something everyone could hold, and perhaps the first to be forgotten on purpose. They worshipped gods no one remembers, traded in colors born from sea snails, built cities on islands that refused to surrender, and when they vanished, it was not in fire, but in silence. Who were they? Why did the Romans fear them long after their ships stopped sailing? How did their lost colonies stretch beyond the edge of every ancient map? And what truth hides in the lullabies still sung on Mediterranean hillsides, in tongues that carry a memory older than borders? This is the story of the Phoenicians. You are the explorer now, and with each fragment we uncover, each ruin we descend, we will follow the traces they left behind, scattered in salt, fire, and song. This is not a history told by kings. It is one carried by wind, and it begins where the maps end. The sea mists had barely lifted when I arrived at the edge of Byblos. The city did not announce itself with grandeur. No towering ziggurats, no triumphal arches, just sun-bleached ruins scattered along the coast, half-draped in shadow. But there was a stillness here, a patience, as though the stones themselves were waiting for someone to listen. Byblos. The name itself feels old. It is one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world, and standing there, you feel it. Layers of time built one atop the other like sediment in an ancient sea. Before the Greeks, before the Romans, before the Bible even had pages, there was Byblos. The scent of cedar drifted on the air, faint but unmistakable. That was the key, the lifeblood. Long before empires rose on land, this humble port carved its dominion through trees. Massive, straight-trunked cedars once blanketed the mountains inland. The Phoenicians, masterful shipwrights, knew how to fell them, cure them, shape them into the bones of vessels that could cross oceans. The Egyptians called it the land of the trees. Pharaohs sent envoys here bearing gold, alabaster, lapis lazuli, all to trade for the wood that would build their temples and tune this way. We found remnants of that trade in the dust, fragments of ivory combs, cartouches bearing hieroglyphs, even a broken scarab ring, likely lost by some scribe from Thebes. This was not mere commerce, it was cultural exchange, centuries before the term existed. Byblos was the bridge, a city built not on conquest, but on connection. And then there was the purple. The Phoenicians are remembered for many things, but none so enduring or so enigmatic as their dye. Tyrian purple. Born from the murex sea snail, it took thousands of shells boiled for days to produce a single ounce. The color it made was deep and impossible to imitate, somewhere between crimson and violet, with a strange shifting sheen that seemed almost alive in the sun. The workshop we found sat beneath a collapsed stone roof, its floor littered with shell fragments, not clean or beautiful, raw, cracked husks soaked in time. The smell, it clung to the air, acrid, marine, as though the sea itself had died here. But from that decay, royalty was born. Tyrian purple became the color of emperors, of priests, of divine right. It began in Byblos, where men labored in the stench for glory they would never wear. In a shallow pit nearby, I found a small amphora, sealed with a corroded stopper. The contents had long since dried, but a faint ring of pigment still clung to the clay. Purple. Faded, yes, but undeniable, like a fingerprint of a vanished world. The locals whispered of the goddess Baalat Gibal, Lady of Byblos, whose temple once stood on the hill above. She was worshipped here for over 2,000 years. Later, she would be folded into the Egyptian pantheon, equated with Hathor. Still later, she would vanish altogether, absorbed by the tides of history. But her gaze, they say, still watches over the harbor. As I stood at the edge of the ancient quay, looking out over the same waters their ships once crossed, I felt something rare. Not awe, not revelation, but continuity. The sense that the world does not forget, not truly. Byblos was more than a city. It was a spark, the first flicker of what would become the Phoenician flame. A place where trees became ships, snails became royalty, and writing, still unborn, stirred in the minds of merchants. This was not the beginning of the journey, but it was the place where the road turned toward the sea. And I was not the first to follow it, only the most recent. The tide was coming in as I walked the edge of the ancient dock. Waves licked the stone in slow, rhythmic sighs, like the breath of something sleeping just beneath the surface. There were no ships now, only crumbling moorings, old iron rings rusted into silence, and the faint scent of salt and wood long surrendered to the sea. But once, this place was alive. With oars creaking, sails catching wind, voices calling out in a dozen tongues. The Phoenicians were not born conquerors. They were born navigators. Long before the Greeks built triremes, before the Romans ruled the Mediterranean, before the Norse carved dragon ships, there were the cedar vessels of the Phoenicians. Slender, fast, built with precision and care. Their hulls curved like fish through the water. Their sails were not just cloth, but wings. Designed to dance with the wind, not fight it, they moved not only with power, but with grace. Their home ports were narrow slivers of coastline, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, all hemmed in by mountains, all facing the sea. There was no land left to conquer. So they turned outward. They looked across the waves and saw not danger, but possibility. I found a ship's eye carved into a stone slab, half buried in sand near an old harbor wall. A stylized almond shape, once painted black, staring outward toward the horizon. The Phoenicians believed every ship had a soul, and that soul needed to see. Every prow bore these eyes, not as decoration, but as protection, vision, a way to guide the vessel through storm and shadow. Their world was measured not in miles, but in ports, in promontories, in wind currents and stars. They read the night sky like scripture, the North Star Orion's belt, the great dog, and they used sounding lines and lead weights to judge the sea's depth, to listen to its secrets, from Cyprus to Crete, from Sicily to Sardinia. They left footprints across the entire Mediterranean, not in blood, but in trade goods, in amphorae filled with oil and wine, in tin from Britain, in ivory from Africa, in glass and perfume and strange herbs gathered from every shore. We found a ledger scratched into a clay tablet. Faded but legible, it listed cargo from 3 ports, each in a different script. The goods were ordinary: dates, resin, dyed cloth. But the handwriting told the real story. A sailor who could speak across cultures, who could haggle in Ugaritic, count in Egyptian, and sing drinking songs in ancient Greek. The Phoenicians did not bring war, they brought connection. And yet there was danger, always danger. The sea gave life, but it also took it. Storms rose with little warning. Pirates waited in the narrows. Reefs and rocks held no mercy. So they hugged the coastlines when they could, but they dared open water when they must. There are tales of Phoenician ships sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Atlantic, north along the coast of Spain, even to Britain for tin. There are maps, vague and unfinished, showing shorelines no one else should have known. Some say they circled Africa, others whisper they reached lands far beyond. We cannot prove it, but neither can we deny it. What we do know is this: they went farther than anyone had reason to go, and they returned with stories, with goods, with knowledge written into every wave. The sea was their empire, not ruled with soldiers, but with sails. Standing at that ruined dock, I listened to the tide and imagined the rhythm of oars, the creak of rope, the shout of sailors seeing a new coast for the first time. The Phoenicians were not just merchants, they were dreamers, navigators of the unknown, masters of the deep, and the first to believe that the edge of the map was only the beginning. The room was small, no roof, no doors, just sunlit dust and the quiet breath of the wind weaving through broken stones. Somewhere near the heart of ancient Byblos, beneath layers of rubble and forgotten time, we found it. A shard of clay, jagged, dull, unassuming. At first it looked like any other piece of debris, but when we turned it in the light, the marks caught our eyes. Simple strokes, angular, clean. Not art, not decoration, but language. It was a remnant of a revolution, one not born in a palace or a temple, but in a marketplace. This was the beginning of the alphabet. Long before Latin, before Greek, before Hebrew or Aramaic or Arabic, there were the letters of the Phoenicians. Just over 20 signs, each representing a sound, a breath, a shape the mouth makes when it speaks. No pictures, no sacred symbols, just sound captured in form. Before this, writing belonged to the powerful. Cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, complex, esoteric, beautiful, yes, but closed. They required years to learn, decades to master. Only scribes and priests held the keys. But the Phoenicians were not kings, they were merchants, sailors, traders. They needed something different, something fast, something useful. And so they created a script made not for gods, but for people. The alphabet was born out of necessity. Trade demanded records, goods needed labels, ships carried cargo across dozens of ports, and contracts had to be clear. And so, a new way of writing emerged, one that did not rely on pictures of oxen or rivers or birds, but on the sound of speech itself. Each letter stood for a consonant. No vowels at first, those would come later, with the Greeks. But the bones were there, the foundation was set. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daleth. They sound familiar because they are. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. The names changed, the shapes evolved, but the soul remained. Every letter we use today, in every language that draws from Latin or Greek or Cyrillic roots, is a descendant of this forgotten script carved into clay by hands long turned to dust. In a small museum archive, I held a bronze knife with a short inscription along its blade. The letters were Phoenician. They named the owner, perhaps a gift, perhaps a mark of status. But what struck me was how clear the writing was. Not decorative, not sacred, just direct. There was a confidence in the simplicity, a message carried not just across space, but across centuries. What the Phoenicians did was more than invent writing. They democratized it. With this system, you no longer needed to be a scribe to write a contract. You did not need a temple to make a record. A merchant could track his wares, a sailor could mark a route, a child could learn to write their name. The alphabet traveled with them, across harbors and borders, into Crete, into Greece, into Rome. It evolved, it shifted, it adapted, but the seed was Phoenician, the spark that lit the mind of Western literacy. And yet, they did not leave libraries behind. No great archives, no epic poems etched in stone. Their words survived in fragments, on pots, on weapons, on stray pieces of wall, as if they knew the letters themselves would outlive the stories they carried. I stood in that roofless room holding the clay shard and felt a strange stillness. This was not just a discovery, it was a mirror. The language you hear now, the script that wrote these words, it began here, in this dust, in this moment. The Phoenicians did not just sail seas or trade goods. They changed the way we think. They gave us the symbols to capture thought, memory, meaning, and with those marks they made history speak. The sea had swallowed her edges, but not her memory. I arrived at Tyre just after dawn, when the mist still clung to the coast and the waves whispered over the stones like a lullaby. There were no towering gates to pass through, no carved lions to guard the way, just a stretch of broken columns leaning toward the surf, and the unmistakable sense that beneath these waters slept a city that once ruled the waves. Tyre, the jewel of the Phoenician world. Unlike her sister cities, Tyre straddled two worlds: the mainland, where temples rose and markets bustled, and the island, a natural fortress ringed in sea and stone. There, across the narrow strait, the true heart of Tyre once beat, a citadel of wealth and defiance. From that rocky perch, she stared down empires. For centuries, she held her ground, against tides, against armies, against time. The old harbor still curved like a horseshoe around what remains of the island's edge. Quiet now, but once it had brimmed with ships, their sails stained purple, their decks heavy with goods, Phoenician sailors unloading amphorae of wine, cedarwood planks, ivory and glass, and always the dye, the royal purple, the color that defined this city. It was here, in Tyre, that the industry reached its peak. Vast vats for boiling murex snails stood not far from the shoreline. The stench, according to ancient writers, was overwhelming, but no one cared. That color, that impossible glistening hue, was worth more than gold. It adorned emperors, priests, kings. To wear purple was to command power, and all of it flowed from Tyre. I walked the remains of the seawall, the stone beneath my feet, worn smooth by time and tide. On one side, the open Mediterranean, on the other, the ghost of the city. Markets now buried, streets turned to rubble, but you can still see it if you know how to look. The outlines of courtyards, the foundations of temples, the bones of what was once the most prosperous port in the ancient world. The city's defenders knew their strength came not just from wealth, but from isolation. The sea was their shield. For centuries it worked. Raiders came, they burned the mainland, but the island held. Even when the Assyrians laid siege, Tyre endured. They built boats faster than they burned. They survived on ingenuity, on salt air, and stubbornness. But then came Alexander, the Macedonian general. Fresh from conquering lands to the east, reached Tyre in his march west. He demanded entry. They refused. And so, he did the impossible. His men built a causeway, a massive land bridge stretching half a mile into the sea, stone by stone, piling up rubble, timber, sand. Under constant attack from Tyrian ships, they pressed on. It took 7 months, but when the causeway was complete, he marched across it, and Tyre fell. Today, that causeway still stands, now part of the modern city. But if you look at satellite images, you can still see the outline of the old island, its bones fused to the mainland by the hands of conquest. And yet, even in ruin, Tyre endures. The stones are worn, the temples are broken, but her story is written into the DNA of the sea, in every port that traces its lineage to Phoenician hands, in every alphabet that carries the shapes first scratched in her walls, in every merchant who dares cross oceans for something more. Tyre was not just a city, she was a statement. That power could come from the sea. That wealth could rise from trade, not conquest. That beauty could be forged in salt, stone, and dye. She was the crown of the coast, the jewel of the waves. And though the tides have changed, her glint still lingers, just beneath the surface. The air in Carthage is different, drier, brighter. The sea still reaches for the shore, but it carries a different scent. Warmer, richer, laced with the perfume of olive trees and sun-baked earth. I stood on a ridge above the ruins as the sun rose over the Gulf of Tunis. Below, scattered stones trace the ghost of a city that once rivaled empires, the daughter of Tyre, the last breath of a drowned world. Her name was Carthage, the new city. But there was nothing small or newborn about it. Founded, as the story goes, by a queen in exile, Alyssa, Dido, a princess of Tyre who fled betrayal and sailed west, carrying with her not just people, but memory, tradition, fire. According to legend, she struck a clever bargain with the local Berber king. She asked only for as much land as could be covered by a single ox hide. Then she cut that hide into strips thin as thread and encircled a hill. Bursa, it became the heart of Carthage. Carthage did not grow like other cities. It exploded. Within a few generations, it had eclipsed its mother. Her harbors were engineering marvels, round, man-made, with hidden docks and fortified entrances. Her navy rivaled any in the Mediterranean. Her walls were thick, her people fierce, her language, still Phoenician, whispered from Africa to Sicily to Sardinia. We walked the remains of the naval base, a great circle now filled with still water. Quiet now, but once it had churned with the energy of 1,000 ships. Not warships at first, traders, always traders. Carthage, like Tyre before her, dealt in commerce, in silver and tin, in ivory and slaves, in dyes, cloth, and rare goods from the African interior. Carthaginian merchants reached deep into Spain, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, even down the Atlantic coast of Africa. They picked up where their ancestors had left off and went further. But Carthage was not just a mirror of Tyre. She was more ambitious, more aggressive. The mother fled conquest. The daughter prepared for it. As we sifted through layers of debris in what had once been a marketplace, we uncovered coins stamped with palm trees and horses, symbols of fertility and war. It was here, in this blend of wealth and strength, that Carthage found its power. She was no longer just a trader, she was a rival, and her rival was Rome. The Punic Wars. That is how history remembers it. A clash of titans. But at its heart, it was a war of philosophies. Rome, born from legions and law. Carthage, born from sails and silver. The wars would span over a century, and it is said that the second The one led by Hannibal nearly ended Rome altogether, but Carthage's end was not to come on a battlefield. It came in fire. In the Third War, Rome returned, and this time they did not come to fight. They came to erase. After a brutal siege, they broke through. The city burned for days. The streets ran with smoke and silence. The survivors were sold. The ground was said to be salted, cursed against rebirth. But that too was a story. Carthage did rise again, Roman, then Christian, then Byzantine, but never again the power she once was. As I stood in the forum, surrounded by Roman columns and shattered Phoenician stones, I tried to hear her voice beneath the layers. It was faint, but it was there. Carthage was not just a city of walls and wealth. She was a dream carried across the sea, the last great flame of a civilization that had once lit the Mediterranean from edge to edge. And though the tide took Tyre and fire took Carthage, the echo of both still carries, in stone, in language, in the wind. The cave was hidden behind a curtain of vines high on the cliffs above Tartessos. You would not find it on any modern map. Inside, the air was thick with damp stone and old secrets. Flickering torchlight revealed faded frescoes along the walls, ships with crescent sails, horned figures with raised hands, and amphora marked with strange foreign symbols. This was no local shrine. It was Phoenician, a waypoint, a memory, a whisper from an ancient trade route carved not into earth, but into story. They called them merchants, traders, but the Phoenicians were more than that. They were myth-bearers, carriers of memory wrapped in goods. They did not just sell objects, they brought ideas, languages, gods, the fabric of identity itself. From the ports of Sidon and Tyre, they set sail with ships low in the water, heavy with glass, textiles, oils, and metals. But they also carried songs, legends, symbols that slipped into local tongues and carved their way into the bones of emerging civilizations. It was through Phoenician hands that Baal met Zeus, that Astarte became Ishtar, and that Melkart, the god of the city of Tyre, found a second life as Hercules. We found a silver medallion in a burial mound near Cadiz. One side bore a Phoenician inscription, the other, a stylized face unmistakably Greek in style, but with a beard braided in the old Tyrian fashion. This was not coincidence. This was deliberate. The melding of worlds. The Phoenicians knew the value of a shared language, not just in speech, but in symbol. They were translators of culture. They traded tin from Britain, amber from the Baltic, and papyrus from Egypt. In their amphorae flowed not just wine, but stories. The origin of each good told a tale, and the tales traveled further than the goods themselves. The god Mercury, whom the Romans would later call the patron of commerce and travel, owes part of his identity to the Phoenician tricksters who sailed ahead of their time. He was fast, clever, elusive, much like them. In fact, the Greeks called the Phoenicians the purple people for the dye they sold, but also whispered of their cunning, their ability to speak any tongue, read any sign, blend into any market. It is no wonder that so many myths lingered in their wake. There were stories of islands that moved, of ships that vanished, only to return decades later with holds full of gold. There were rumors of strange beasts traded in shadowy harbors, of serpents with feathers, of coins that sang. We cannot say how many of these tales were true, and how many were clever distractions. Misdirection was also a form of trade. In a coastal temple in Malta, I found a carved panel of unknown origin. A procession of robed figures carried what appeared to be goods, but look closer. and you see something else. A hidden pattern of stars above their heads. A map, perhaps, or a calendar, or something older, stranger, known only to the initiates who passed through that port long ago. The Phoenicians moved like smoke. Where others planted flags, they planted stories. Where others built empires of stone, they built networks of memory. It was less visible, but far more enduring. Today, their goods are scattered in museums across the world. Their gods have been renamed, their language nearly forgotten, but their influence, like Mercury, seeps into the cracks. Untraceable, but unmistakable. They were not just merchants of goods, they were merchants of meaning. And in every marketplace, in every port where language shifts and stories blend, their legacy lingers still. The temple at Kishan was almost gone. Swallowed by centuries of silence, its stones scattered across the Cypriot earth like the bones of some long-forgotten beast. Only the altar remained, half sunk into the soil, a slab of black basalt, charred at the edges, scarred by time. I knelt beside it, brushing away the dust. The scent of ash still clung faintly to the surface. Faint, but there, a trace of fire, a breath of offering. The Phoenicians did not build their gods in marble or gold. They built them in salt and smoke. Their pantheon was vast, fluid, and ever-changing, a reflection of their journeys. Each port brought a new face, a new name, a new myth folded into the old. At the center stood Baal, the storm god, the master of thunder and flame. He commanded the sky, but his rage could churn the sea. Beside him, Astarte, goddess of love, war, and the moon. Her temples faced the water. Her rites, it is said, included sacred flames and unspoken desires. And then there was Melkart, the god of Tyre, lord of the city, of voyages, of renewal. Later, the Greeks would see him in Hercules. But to the Phoenicians, he was something older, deeper. These were not distant deities. They lived in the tide, in the wind, in the fire that burned behind closed temple doors. We found a carved ivory plaque near Sidon, no larger than a man's hand. It showed a ship, small and sleek, caught in a storm. Beneath the waves, shadowy figures swam upward, arms outstretched, eyes wide. Not men, not fish. Something in between. Spirits of the deep, guardians, or punishers. Even now, no one is sure. But the message was clear. The sea was not empty. It was sacred, and sacred things are never safe. The rituals tied to these gods were secretive. Some we can piece together. Libations poured over altars, incense burned at sunrise, animals offered beneath moonlight. Others are harder to speak of. At a dig site in Tophet, on the edge of ancient Carthage, we uncovered urns, dozens, each carefully sealed, inside charred bone fragments. Many belonged to animals, sheep, goats, but others were smaller, infants, children. The evidence is contested, the conclusions debated. Were these the victims of sacrifice, or were they honored in death, returned to the gods as part of some funerary rite? No inscription tells us, only silence, and the unease it leaves behind. What we do know is that the Phoenicians believed deeply in the balance of favor. A safe voyage required more than a skilled crew. It required a blessing, a covenant, blood perhaps, in exchange for safe passage. To them, the gods were not moral. They were forces, wild, ancient, and unknowable, and to ignore them was to invite ruin. In a storm off the coast of Crete, I once saw lightning strike the sea. It lit the night for a single moment, white and searing. And in that moment, I understood. These gods were not myths. They were memories of nature's power, personified in fear and reverence. Even today, fishermen in parts of Lebanon and Tunisia toss a coin or a pinch of salt into the sea before setting sail. They do not say why, just that it is tradition, an old habit, something their fathers taught them, something their fathers never questioned. The gods of the Phoenicians have no temples now, no priests, no hymns. But they are not gone. They are the waves themselves, the salt in the air, the fire that flickers in the sailor's heart when land slips from view. And if you listen, standing by a ruined altar with the tide rising at your feet, you may still hear them breathing beneath the waves. The wind shifted as we crossed into Iberia. It was different here, drier, touched by dust and distance. The air smelled of cork trees and wild rosemary. And though the coastline stretched wide and open, something about it felt closed, like it was hiding secrets behind every ridge and cove. The maps called it the end of the world, but the Phoenicians had come here long before anyone else dared. Far beyond the reach of Tyre or Sidon, past the Pillars of Hercules where the Mediterranean spilled into the Atlantic, the Phoenicians found new harbors. They did not come to conquer. They came to plant seeds, trading posts at first, safe harbors for rest and resupply, but over time, settlements, colonies, silent foundations laid in foreign soil. Most of these places have no names we remember, no myths attached to them, but their bones still surface now and then, shards of amphorae in Spanish vineyards, coins found beneath whitewashed courtyards, pottery with unmistakable Phoenician lines dug up from beneath Roman roads, echoes of towns forgotten by time, but not by the earth. Gadir, what we now call Cadiz, is one of the few that endures. Founded nearly 3,000 years ago, it is considered one of the oldest cities in Western Europe. There, along the Andalusian coast, the Phoenicians built more than a port. They built a foothold. From Gadir, they launched ships into the Atlantic, north, toward Britain, south, down along the Moroccan coast, and inland into the heart of Iberia, chasing silver and tin along river routes few others knew. In a windswept field near Hulva, I found fragments of a ceramic vessel. Nothing ornate, just a storage jar, but stamped along its rim was a symbol, Phoenician, a mark of ownership or trade, a reminder that they had been here, quietly, long before the Romans, before the Moors, before even the native tribes had settled in stone. There are whispers of a colony near the mouth of the Tagus River, another along the coast of modern-day Portugal, but they left little behind. These were not cities meant to last. They were meant to move, to trade, to vanish when the silver ran dry or the alliances grew thin. And yet, the stories remain. Local legends speak of strangers with red sails, of tall ships arriving at dusk, bearing gifts no one had ever seen, glass beads, colored cloth, spices. There are tales of temples to gods whose names no one remembers, of altars buried under olive groves, of caves filled with firelight and songs in a forgotten tongue. These are not just stories. In Galicia, a stone stele was unearthed bearing markings no local script could explain. Some say it matches Phoenician forms, others deny it, but the resemblance is haunting, like a voice trying to speak through water. Even the metals tell their tale. In Phoenician ports across the Mediterranean, ingots of Iberian silver have been found, smelted with techniques foreign to the East, proof that the connection was real, that the trade was alive, that these distant outposts were not just myths but vital arteries in a network that spanned the known world, and possibly beyond. The west was not their final destination, it was another threshold, another door to push open. The Phoenicians never feared the horizon. They followed it. Today, their colonies are footnotes, scattered ruins, unmarked graves beneath vineyards and highways, but for a moment in time, they were bridges, between worlds, between ages. And if you stand along the cliffs at sunset, watching the Atlantic devour the sun, you can almost see it, a red-sailed ship, gliding just beyond the waves, still searching, always searching, for the edge of the map. The storeroom had collapsed long ago. Just a corner of stone foundation remained, buried beneath centuries of soil and silence. We were digging near ancient Sidon when the tablet emerged, pressed flat between two fallen bricks. No gold, no art, just lead, thin and cold in the hand. But scratched into its surface was something far more valuable, a message, one that no empire could control. The letters were strange, some clearly Phoenician, others borrowed. Greek, maybe, or Egyptian. A hybrid script written by someone who knew how to move between worlds. This was the true genius of the Phoenicians. They were not just traders, they were translators, code switchers, linguistic chameleons who navigated not only wind and water, but culture. They spoke the secret language of trade, one made not just of words but of weight, measure, gesture, tone. It was a system that let them pass through foreign markets like shadows, welcome everywhere, at home, nowhere. They did not build empires with soldiers. They built networks. You could see it in their ledgers, if you could find one, in the tally marks on amphorae, in the stamped seals on bundles of cloth, in the quiet way they taught locals how to count their own wealth, then took a fair share without bloodshed. I stood once in an old port warehouse in Cyprus. Along the base of the wall, hidden beneath layers of plaster, were painted symbols, not words, but signs. A ship with an open eye, a triangle, a bird, each a marker like the shorthand of a silent guild. Some meant danger, others profit. One meant trusted vendor, another meant offer salt, not gold. This was how they navigated the world, not with swords, but with signs. They learned the languages of every shore, Ugadic in the north, Egyptian in the south, Aramaic, Hittite, Mycenaean Greek, but they also invented shortcuts, blended tongues, market pigeons that let transactions move quickly, clearly. They would gesture with open palms, tap 3 fingers against the chest, or make a mark in the dirt. No contracts needed, just reputation, just trust. Their alphabet helped too. Simple, portable, flexible. It could be learned in days, taught in minutes. And once it caught on, it spread like fire in dry brush. Wherever Phoenician ships landed, the alphabet followed, not forced upon the people, just offered. As a tool, a gift, a code anyone could learn. And yet, they always kept something for themselves. The true codes, the merchant glyphs, the silent signals passed between captains with a look or a knot tied in a certain way. The meaning of a cargo left slightly unsealed. The weight of a coin tapped twice on the counter. There was power in what was not spoken. Even today, archaeologists find weights in Phoenician ruins that do not match any known system. Odd measures, obscure units, but they made sense once, to someone. To a network that moved faster than armies and reached farther than kings. In this language, value was fluid. Silver in one port was cedar wood in another. A bolt of dyed cloth could be worth a week's food or a seat at the governor's table, depending on the tide and the timing. The Phoenicians understood this. They read the room like they read the stars, instinctively, constantly adjusting. They left behind no epic poems, no grand statues of their gods. But they left something subtler, a blueprint for how to move through the world, unnoticed, yet essential. In every modern contract, every signature, every receipt, there is a whisper of this secret language, a mark from those who first traded not just goods, but understanding. And though their voices are gone, the code still holds, hidden, waiting for those who know how to read between the lines. The ruins above Sidon were quiet when we arrived, just the wind pushing through empty archways and the faint hiss of the sea beyond the hill. Beneath our boots, the earth sparkled strangely, not gold, not stone, but tiny fragments translucent, catching the light in flashes of green, blue, and violet. We had found the furnace sites. This was where the glassmakers once worked. Sidon was famous in its time, not for armies or kings, but for something far more delicate, something born of fire and sand. The Phoenicians here did not simply trade, they transformed. In great clay furnaces, they melted the coast itself, grains of silica fused into liquid, shaped with breath and motion into vessels that were unlike anything the world had seen. Glass was not new, but in Sidon it was perfected. We uncovered shards of bowls, perfume bottles, goblets, each one different, some plain, made for markets far from these shores, others intricate, twisted with color or etched with patterns that caught the sunlight like flame. The craftsmanship was not just skilled, it was bold, confident, as if the makers were not just working for use, but for beauty. The technique they used remains partly a mystery. Recipes lost, temperatures unknown. No written manual survived, but in the glass itself, the clues remain. Bubbles suspended midair, swirls of color formed as if by accident or by design. Some pieces bear marks of tools, others the trace of a fingerprint, sealed forever beneath a surface that had cooled too quickly. In a collapsed corner of what was once a workshop, we found the base of a furnace. The brick was scorched black. The air around it still held the ghost of heat. Nearby, broken rods of glass lay where they had fallen, untouched for centuries. It felt personal, like the artisans had stepped out for a moment, expecting to return, but they never did. Sidon's glassmakers were more than craftsmen. They were alchemists of the visible. They took something as ordinary as sand and gave it form, clarity, light. Their wares traveled farther than even their ships, into Egypt, into Greece, into the palaces of Persia and the markets of Rome. Pharaohs traded gold for it. Kings sent envoys to learn their secrets. But the secrets stayed here. We found inscriptions on shipping crates, symbols that meant fragile, precious, Sidon. That name became synonymous with glass, even long after the workshops fell silent. Travelers wrote of it in awe. Merchants guarded it with pride. And yet today, few remember. Glass is everywhere now, in windows, in screens, in our hands, but we forget that once it was a marvel, a mystery, the work of invisible fire and unseen hands. In a museum drawer, I once held a Sidonian glass bead, no bigger than a fingertip. Its core was cobalt blue, wrapped in threads of white and gold. It had been found in a child's grave in southern Italy, placed there as a treasure, perhaps a final comfort. To that family, it was not just an ornament, it was magic. standing among the ruins, I realized the Glassmakers had left more than artifacts. They left a legacy of transformation, of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, of beauty born in heat and risk and vision. Their names are gone, their formulas lost, but their creations endure. Fragile, yes, but unbroken. And in every pane of glass that bends the sunlight, in every vessel that holds more than it should, they live on. The lost glassmakers of Sidon, silent now, but never forgotten. The water was calm when I stood on the narrow strip of land that now connects Tyre to the mainland. Fishermen passed behind me, dragging nets, their boats rocking in the gentle tide. But under my feet was war. Buried beneath coral and concrete was one of the strangest and most brutal sieges in ancient history. A battle not just of armies, but of will. The moment when Tyre, proud, defiant, unconquered, was finally brought to its knees. The year was 332 before the Common Era. Alexander of Macedon, newly crowned pharaoh of Egypt and self-proclaimed liberator of the East, had begun his march through the Levant. City after city surrendered to him. Some welcomed him, others bent under his glare. But when he reached the coast and sent word to Tyre asking entry to the island to sacrifice in the temple of Melkart, the answer was simple. No. Tyre was not a city that bowed easily. It had watched empires come and go. The Assyrians had tried to take it. The Babylonians had laid siege for 13 years, and still it stood, an island fortress, walled and willed into existence. Its navy unmatched, its harbor deep and defensible. To the people of Tyre, Alexander was just another wave crashing against the rock. But he was not like the others. When the Tyrians refused him, he made a decision that would change not only their fate, but the geography of the city forever. He would build a road, a causeway, half a mile of earth and stone stretching from the shore to the island. He would bring the land to the sea. It sounds impossible, and in many ways it was. Alexander's men worked day and night, dragging timber, piling rock, laying foundations in the shallows. At first it was easy. The water near the shore was shallow. Progress was quick. But the deeper they went, the more the sea fought back. The Tyrians, watching from their walls, sent ships to burn the construction. They launched fire from the sea. They sabotaged the edges of the growing path. Still, Alexander pushed forward. He brought in siege towers, catapults, war engines mounted on the causeway itself. It became not just a road, but a moving fortress. 7 months of labor, of setbacks, of fury. And then, the walls were breached. What followed was brutal. The city burned. Thousands were killed. Others were sold into slavery. The temple of Melkart was claimed. The harbor taken. Tyre, that floating jewel of the Phoenician world, was no longer untouchable. She had been dragged back to the earth. Today, the causeway still exists. It has reshaped the coastline. What was once an island is now part of the mainland. Alexander's defiance became geography, and Tyre was never the same again. But when I walked the old stones, I noticed something. The city still stands. Its spirit still lingers in the cracks. In the old harbor, fishermen still cast their lines. Children still climb over the ruins. Life returned. Alexander won the siege, but he did not erase the soul of Tyre. The siege was not just a military feat. It was a moment when two worlds collided, one built on conquest, the other on endurance. The stones remember both. And as the waves lap quietly against the shore, I think of the men who moved a continent and the city that made them earn every step. Tyre fell that year, but it did not vanish. Its echo still walks beside the sea. The first time I saw his name, it was carved into blackened stone. Just a fragment, cracked by fire, dug from the ruins of a Carthaginian outpost in southern Spain. The letters were worn, the language ancient, but they were unmistakable. Hannibal, a name that still echoes like thunder across the centuries. To most, Hannibal is remembered for elephants, for the Alps, for the audacity of a general who brought Rome to its knees. But to understand Hannibal, we must first understand what created him. Not just the man, but the memory that shaped him. Carthage was his cradle, a city born of Tyrian blood and saltwater ambition, a place where every child grew up under the long shadow of Rome. By the time Hannibal was born, the First Punic War had already been lost. Carthage, once mistress of the seas, had been humbled, forced to pay tribute, stripped of power, but not of pride. Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca, was a soldier, a patriot, and a man who never forgot. He raised his son with fire in his veins and an oath on his lips. According to legend, Hannibal swore before the gods, as a child, never to be a friend to Rome. That promise would shape the world. We traced Hannibal's trail to ancient Carthago Nova in what is now Cartagena, Spain. Here, he built his base of power, not just with armies, but with alliances. He married into Iberian nobility, trained his troops in mountain terrain, and gathered elephants, not as weapons of war, but as symbols. Living myths, he was preparing for something few believed possible. Then, in 218 before the Common Era, he began his march. It is almost impossible to imagine. From Iberia, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and over the snowbound Alps, with tens of thousands of men, cavalry, and those iconic elephants. A journey of over 1,000 miles. In winter, against nature, against time. Many did not survive. Avalanches, bandits, cold, hunger. But Hannibal pressed on, driven not by conquest alone, but by memory. The memory of a city burned, a people humiliated, a father's oath. When he emerged in Italy, the world changed. Rome had never seen anything like him. For over a decade, Hannibal fought across the Italian countryside, winning battles with brilliance and terror. At Cannae, he orchestrated one of the greatest tactical victories in military history. His smaller force encircled and annihilated a Roman army nearly twice its size. We walked that field. It is peaceful now, grasses swaying gently. But beneath the soil, over 50,000 Romans fell in a single day. A silence still clings to the air. Yet Hannibal never took Rome itself. He waited for allies that never came. His supplies thinned. His troops grew weary. And slowly, the tide turned. The Romans adapted. They endured. And eventually, they struck back. Not in Italy, but in Africa. The final blow came at Zama. Hannibal faced Scipio Africanus in a battle that ended the Second Punic War. Carthage survived, but it was broken, and Hannibal faded into exile. We found a coin from his later years, minted in the East, his face still proud, still sharp. A man without a nation, still feared, still watched. Rome never forgave brilliance. To the Romans, Hannibal was a monster. A terror told in bedtime stories. But to Carthage, he was a hero, a flame that refused to die. Hannibal was more than a general. He was memory made flesh, the living shadow of a drowned empire, striking back with brilliance and resolve. And though he died far from his homeland, in a foreign court under threat of Roman capture, his legacy never stopped marching. not through snow, not through fire, not even through time. The wind that blows through Carthage today carries the scent of dust, olive groves, and silence. Beneath the bright skies of Tunisia, it is easy to forget what once happened here. The ruins are scattered, half buried in calm. Columns, mosaic floors, fragments of villas. Roman. Almost all Roman, but if you listen closely, beneath the footsteps of tourists and the hum of the city, you can still hear it. The echo of a world erased. The Romans called it the Third Punic War. By the time Rome returned to Carthage in the year 149 before the Common Era, Hannibal was long gone. The city had recovered in trade, though not in strength. It posed no real threat. But Rome remembered. Rome never forgot those years of terror, of defeat, of a general who had nearly taken the eternal city itself. And so, Rome came not to conquer, but to finish what it had begun. The Senate debated the matter in public. Cato the Elder, it is said, ended every speech with the same words: Carthage must be destroyed. And in the end, it was. The siege lasted for 3 years. 3 years of fire, starvation, and resistance. The Carthaginians fought house to house, street by street. Farmers, traders, even the city's nobility took up arms. They reforged temple offerings into weapons. They fought with nothing left to lose. When the walls finally fell, the city was put to the torch. The flames rose so high that sailors claimed to see them from across the sea. It burned for days. When it was over, 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. The rest, the art, the archives, the temples, the names, were turned to ash. According to some accounts, the Romans salted the earth, ensuring that nothing would grow again. Historians debate the truth of that detail, but the message was not to be remembered. It was to be removed, but history does not obey orders. We walked the ruins, not just of Rome's city, but of the city beneath it. In places, layers of rubble reveal Phoenician stones, older, smoother, laid in different patterns. A buried architecture that defies the narrative. In museums, fragments of Punic writings survive on urns, tablets, and broken walls. Names erased from official records but preserved in clay. We found one such fragment inside a Roman house, a shard of mosaic that bore the outline of a palm tree, the symbol of Carthage. It had been broken, covered, but not destroyed. The hands that laid the Roman floor must have seen it and left it. Even in erasure, something remained. The Romans rebuilt Carthage decades later as a Roman colony. Roads were laid, aqueducts stretched across the hills, a new city rose atop the ruins of the old, but it was a mask. Beneath the streets, the soil still held the blood and memory of another civilization, one that had lit fires across the Mediterranean, one that had traded in myths and meaning. Erasure is never clean. You can burn the books, tear down the temples, rename the gods. But the story lives in the soil, in the shadows between stones, in the absence that lingers too long to be coincidence. Rome wanted to destroy Carthage, to make it a warning, but they made it a legend, and legends do not die quietly. They echo, in ruins, in whispers, in the stubborn persistence of memory. And here, among the quiet hills and shattered tiles, Carthage still speaks, not in defiance, not in anger, but in presence, even in silence. The trail had grown quiet by the time we reached the village. Tucked into the mountains of Lebanon, it looked like any other rural place. Olive trees swaying in the wind, goats grazing along the terraced hillsides, stone homes warming in the afternoon sun. But in one of those homes, an old woman sang a lullaby to her grandchild, a soft, rhythmic melody. The words were foreign, yet oddly familiar. Later, I asked her about it. She smiled and said it was old, older than she could remember. Her grandmother had sung it to her. No one knew what the words meant anymore, but they were kept passed down like heirlooms. When I wrote them down, I saw the shape of something ancient, Phoenician perhaps, or Aramaic, maybe a blend of both, a trace of a voice that had refused to vanish. This is what the Phoenicians left behind. Not monuments, not epics, but language, carried not in books, but in breath. It began with their alphabet, born not in palaces, but on docks and in marketplaces. Just over 20 characters, each tied to a sound. It was not the first writing system, but it was the first that anyone could learn quickly, use easily, and carry with them from port to port. It traveled not by conquest, but by trade, and in time it reshaped the entire world. From the Phoenicians came the Greeks, who added vowels. From the Greeks, the Romans. From the Romans, every Western alphabet that followed. English, Spanish, French, German, even Cyrillic and Arabic bear traces of its influence. Every time you write a letter, you are echoing a Phoenician mark. Aleph became Alpha, Beth became B, Daleth became D. Letters as living fossils etched into every keyboard, every page. But their influence goes deeper than the alphabet. Words that once passed between traders on the shores of Sidon now linger in the languages we speak today. The Hebrew language, closely tied to Phoenician, still carries echoes of those early roots. Ancient prayers chanted in synagogues for centuries use structures and phrases the Phoenicians might have recognized. The very cadence of Semitic speech, rhythmic, rising, full of layered meanings, is a sound they helped shape. In Malta, Arabic dialects preserve words that scholars trace back to Phoenician trade terms. In old coastal towns across North Africa and Sicily, fragments of Punic vocabulary surface in fishermen's slang and rural idioms, not enough to form sentences, just enough to haunt them. Even the way we think about language, the idea of an alphabet as a universal tool, was theirs. Before the Phoenicians, writing belonged to the elite. After them, it belonged to the world. And then there are the accents, the melodies in modern tongues that still carry something ancient. The lilt of Lebanese Arabic, the chant-like call of Syriac Aramaic, the sharp staccato rhythm of Maltese. They do not sound the same, but they carry the same echo, a cadence shaped by trade winds and waves, the language of those who spoke across borders, who saw communication not as ownership, but as invitation. The Phoenicians are gone. Their cities lie in ruin. Their gods have been renamed. Their stories scattered. But their words remain. Not just carved in stone, but spoken, sung, shared. In lullabies, in contracts, in poems, in names whispered to newborns. This is their true legacy, not empire, but expression, not conquest, but connection. A civilization may fall, its temples may crumble, but if its language survives, it still breathes, and in every word that travels from one mouth to another, the water was cold, clear, but dark. We hovered just above the seafloor near Atlit off the coast of modern-day Israel. The divers moved carefully, brushing away sand with gloved hands. Then something emerged, the curve of a hull. Wooden planks, still clinging to their shape after more than 2,000 years. Amphorae nestled like sleeping children, ropes turned to shadow, a ship resting in silence. It was Phoenician. There was no storm recorded, no battle known, no inscription to mark its loss. But here it lay, undisturbed, a frozen voyage, a final journey never completed. The cargo was intact, the anchors still in place. Whatever took it, wind, wave, or weight, happened suddenly, and it buried the story with it. The Phoenicians left few tombs. They built no pyramids, no mausoleums carved into cliffs, but their burial is here, beneath the salt and time, in sunken harbors, in shattered quays, in ships like this one, still heavy with goods and mystery. This is how they are remembered, not through monuments, but through absence. They slipped beneath history, not with a collapse, but a fading. By the time Rome ruled the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians had already splintered. Tyre fell, Carthage burned, their colonies were absorbed, their names rewritten. In Roman records, they became shadows, useful only as ancestors of enemies or curiosities of trade. Their gods were folded into foreign forms, their script adopted and renamed. No great battle marked the end. No single year can be traced. They vanished the way the tide vanishes, slowly, until all that is left is the scent of salt and the shape of someone that once moved. We found Phoenician artifacts buried beneath layers of later cities, amphorae used as foundations for Roman villas, fragments of temples paved over by Byzantine streets. The past was not destroyed, it was overwritten. And yet it is still there, in a carved shell buried in Malta, in a lead weight found deep in a Sardinian cave, in that ship lying silent on the seafloor. The salt preserved what the fire could not. We speak of them now as if they were legend, the merchants who ruled the sea without armies, the sailors who mapped the world before the world believed in maps. But they were real. They lived, loved, prayed, bled, and built. They whispered to their children. They watched their cities rise and fall, and they trusted the sea to carry their memory forward. But the sea keeps secrets. I pressed my hand against one of the amphorae in the wreck. The clay was still cool, still solid, a container meant to hold wine or oil, or perhaps silence. That was their final offering, not to the gods, but to time. Not a story told aloud, but one left buried, a puzzle only the patient could piece together. And now, slowly, we are remembering. Every shard unearthed, every inscription translated, every fragment of a ship pulled from the deep, it all brings them back, not as ghosts, but as voices, as part of us. The Phoenicians never ruled with fear, they ruled with presence. And in their final burial, they remind us that what is forgotten is not always lost. Sometimes it waits, beneath the salt, beneath the sand, beneath the stories we think we know. And if we listen closely enough, we can still hear the waves whisper their names. The tide has gone out. The tools are packed. The last notes scribbled into the journal's worn pages. And as I sit here, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, I find myself returning to one simple truth. The Phoenicians never truly left. They moved like currents beneath history, quiet, steady, powerful. They did not build empires with armies, but with sails, not with walls, but with wind. Their cities rose and fell, their names were buried, but their influence never stopped flowing. Every letter we write, every port that hums with trade, every contract signed, every word read, carries a sliver of their legacy. They were translators of the world, connectors of coasts, whisperers of myths across markets. They taught us that language is not just sound, but survival, that commerce is not greed, but trust, that the sea is not a boundary, but a bridge. And in that, they became something rare, not just a civilization, but a current, one that moves beneath our modern world, shaping it from below. I did not expect to find them in lullabies or in forgotten roads lined with glass. I did not expect their presence to linger in the rhythm of tongues or in the silence of sunken decks. But I have learned history does not need to shout to endure. It waits, patiently, beneath layers of time, of stone, of salt. And when you listen, really listen, you can still hear it breathe. The Phoenicians are gone, their cities crumbled, their gods renamed, but their echo travels still in wind, in language, in the unseen hands that shape the world we now walk. Another piece of the puzzle, another secret swallowed by the ages, but I have learned one thing on this path. History does not whisper, it waits, and now it is waiting for you.